Picture this. You're standing in what feels like the most vulnerable moment of your life, surrounded by strangers in a place where privacy should be guaranteed. Your heart pounds as you realize you're completely outnumbered, outmuscled, and utterly defenseless. The steam rises around you like a fog of uncertainty, and just when you think things couldn't get worse, you discover that the person you thought you knew better than anyone else has been living a double life that could change everything you believed about strength, courage, and what it means to protect the people you love. What would you do if you discovered that the quiet, unassuming woman who seemed so ordinary was actually one of the most elite warriors on the planet? What if everything you thought you knew about power, intimidation, and who the real protectors are in this world was about to be turned completely upside down? This is the true story of Maria Santos, a woman whose secret would shock everyone around her and prove that sometimes the most dangerous people are hiding in plain sight. Sometimes the person who seems the most vulnerable is actually the one person you should never ever underestimate. Get ready for a story that will make you question everything you think you know about appearances, assumptions, and what real strength actually looks like. Maria Santos had always been the kind of person who disappeared into crowds. At 32 years old, she stood barely 5 feet 4 inches tall, with dark brown hair that she usually kept in a simple ponytail and warm brown eyes that seemed to notice everything while revealing nothing. When she walked through the grocery store in her small Colorado town of Millfield, people barely glanced her way. She looked like any other suburban mother picking up ingredients for dinner, wearing jeans and sneakers that had seen better days. That was exactly how she wanted it. Every morning, Maria woke up at 5:30, made coffee in her modest 2-bedroom apartment, and prepared for another day at Miller Community College, where she worked as an administrative assistant. Her job was perfectly ordinary. She answered phones, scheduled appointments, and helped students figure out their class schedules. Her co-workers found her pleasant but quiet. She ate lunch alone most days, reading paperback novels or working on crossword puzzles. She never talked about her past, and when people asked about her family or where she had grown up, she gave vague answers about moving around a lot as a kid. The truth was that Maria Santos was not her real name. The woman who filed reports and organized faculty meetings had spent the last 8 years of her life in some of the most dangerous places on Earth. She had served 3 tours in Afghanistan as part of an elite Navy SEAL unit that officially did not exist. She had been trained to kill with her bare hands, to survive in conditions that would break most people, and to complete missions that were so classified that even thinking about them in detail made her nervous. But nobody in Millfield knew any of that. To them, she was just quiet Maria, who always said please and thank you, who never caused any trouble, and who seemed to live a perfectly boring life. She had worked very hard to become boring. After everything she had seen and done overseas, boring felt like the greatest luxury in the world. Maria had chosen Millfield specifically because it was the kind of place where nothing exciting ever happened. The biggest news in the local paper was usually about the high school football team, or someone's prize-winning tomatoes at the county fair. The most dangerous thing that happened was the occasional fender bender in the supermarket parking lot. It was perfect for someone who needed to disappear from her old life completely. She had moved to Colorado 3 years ago, after spending 2 years in intensive therapy trying to deal with what the military doctors called post-traumatic stress disorder. The nightmares had been the worst part. For months she had barely slept, jumping awake at every small sound. Even now, she still woke up sometimes in a cold sweat, her hand reaching instinctively for weapons that were no longer there. But the quiet routine of her new life had helped. The predictability of filing papers and answering phones was soothing in a way that surprised her. Maria had joined a local gym called Fit Zone partly because her therapist had recommended regular exercise to help with stress, but mostly because she needed to maintain some level of physical fitness. Not the intense conditioning she had maintained as a SEAL, but enough to feel like herself. She was careful not to stand out at the gym either. She used the cardio machines and lifted light weights, nothing that would draw attention to the fact that she was probably stronger and faster than most of the men who worked out there. The gym was another place where she could blend in perfectly. Fit Zone catered mostly to regular people trying to stay in shape rather than serious athletes or bodybuilders. Maria liked that about it. She could do her workout, shower, and leave without having to make small talk with anyone. The other members were mostly friendly suburban types who were too focused on their own fitness goals to pay much attention to the quiet woman who always worked out alone. That Tuesday started like any other day. Maria arrived at the college at 8 o'clock, unlocked her desk, and began sorting through the stack of forms that needed to be processed. Dean Henderson had left her a note asking her to reorganize the filing system in the main office, which would keep her busy for most of the day. She liked projects like that because they were methodical and required concentration, which helped keep her mind from wandering to places she did not want it to go. Around lunchtime, her friend Jennifer from the English department stopped by her desk. Jennifer was one of the few people at work who had made an effort to get to know Maria, though Maria had been careful not to reveal too much about herself even to someone as kind as Jennifer. "Hey Maria, a bunch of us are going to happy hour at Murphy's tonight," Jennifer said, perching on the edge of Maria's desk. "You should come." "When was the last time you did something fun?" Maria smiled politely. "That's really nice of you to ask, but I have plans tonight." This was not exactly true. Her plans consisted of going to the gym, picking up groceries, and watching Netflix until she fell asleep on the couch. But she had learned that saying she had plans was easier than explaining that she preferred to spend her evenings alone. "Come on," Jennifer pressed gently. "I worry about you sometimes. You never go out, you never talk about dating anyone. You're young and pretty and smart. You should be having more fun." Maria felt a familiar tightness in her chest. Jennifer meant well, but she had no idea how complicated Maria's relationship with fun had become. The last time Maria had really let her guard down and tried to have fun, she had ended up in a bar fight with 3 drunk college guys who thought it would be amusing to grab her without permission. She had put all 3 of them in the hospital before she fully realized what she was doing. After that incident, she had decided that keeping to herself was safer for everyone involved. "I appreciate it," Maria said carefully. "Maybe next time." Jennifer looked like she wanted to argue, but the phone rang and Maria answered it, effectively ending the conversation. Jennifer waved goodbye and headed back to her department, leaving Maria alone with her filing and her carefully constructed solitude. The afternoon passed quietly. Maria organized student records, updated the computer database, and answered a dozen phone calls from parents asking about enrollment deadlines. It was exactly the kind of routine, peaceful day that she had built her new life around. By 5 o'clock, she was ready to head to the gym for a usual workout. Fit Zone was moderately busy when she arrived, which was normal for a Tuesday evening. Maria changed into her workout clothes in the locker room and headed out to the main floor. She started with 30 minutes on the elliptical machine, keeping her pace steady and unremarkable. While she exercised, she watched the evening news on the television mounted above the cardio equipment. The lead story was about budget problems in the state legislature, followed by a piece about a charity drive at a local animal shelter. After the cardio, she moved to the weight area and worked through her usual routine of exercises that looked basic but actually maintained most of her functional strength. She was careful to use weights that seemed appropriate for someone of her size and apparent fitness level. The last thing she wanted was for someone to notice that she could bench press significantly more than her body weight, or that her form was too perfect for someone who was supposedly just a casual gym member. By 7 o'clock, she was finished with her workout and headed to the women's locker room to shower before going home. The locker room was usually quiet at this time of day, which was another reason she preferred to work out in the evenings. She could shower and change in peace without having to navigate the social dynamics of a busy locker room. But as Maria pushed open the door to the locker room that Tuesday evening, she immediately sensed that something was different. She could hear voices, louder than normal, coming from the shower area. There was tension in those voices that made the hair on the back of her neck stand up. After 8 years in combat zones, Maria had developed an almost supernatural ability to recognize when a situation was about to turn dangerous. She paused just inside the locker room door, listening carefully. She could hear at least 4 different women talking, and their tone was not friendly. Maria quietly moved toward her locker, hoping to collect her things and leave without getting involved in whatever drama was unfolding in the showers. But as she got closer, she heard something that made her blood run cold. One of the voices belonged to Ashley Morrison, a 19-year-old college student who worked part-time at the gym's front desk. Ashley was sweet and friendly, always ready with a smile and a cheerful greeting. She was also small and shy, the kind of person who had probably never been in a real fight in her life. Ashley sounded scared. "Please," Ashley was saying, her voice shaky and higher than normal. "I don't want any trouble. I can just leave." "Oh no, you're not leaving," came another voice that Maria did not recognize. "We're not done talking to you yet." Maria felt her entire body tense as her military training kicked in automatically. She recognized the tone in that unknown voice. It was the sound of a predator who had cornered prey and was enjoying the moment. Maria had heard that tone before, in interrogation rooms and dark alleys overseas. It never led anywhere good. Moving silently, Maria crept closer to the shower area. She could see 4 young women surrounding Ashley, who was backed against the tiled wall with a towel clutched against her chest. The 4 women were clearly college students, probably athletes based on their size and build. They all had the confident posture of people who were used to being physically intimidating. "You think you're so special because you got that scholarship," one of them was saying. She was tall and blonde with arms that suggested she spent serious time in the weight room. "You think you're better than us." "I don't think that at all," Ashley said, her voice barely above a whisper. "I just work here. I mind my own business." "Yeah, well, your business is about to become our business," said another one of the group. She had short red hair and the kind of smile that promised trouble. "See, my boyfriend thinks you're cute. That's a problem for me." Maria assessed the situation with the tactical mindset that had kept her alive in some very dangerous places. 4 attackers. 1 target. The target was outnumbered and clearly outmatched physically. The attackers had positioned themselves to prevent escape and were using classic intimidation tactics to increase their psychological advantage. The situation was escalating and would likely turn violent very soon. In her old life, this would have been simple. Maria could have neutralized all 4 threats in about 30 seconds without breaking a sweat, but that was not who she was supposed to be anymore. Quiet, boring Maria Santos was not supposed to know how to fight. She was supposed to mind her own business and avoid getting involved in other people's problems. But as she watched Ashley's face grow pale with fear, Maria realized that she could not just stand there and do nothing. Some things were more important than maintaining her cover. Some people were worth protecting, even if it meant risking the peaceful life she had worked so hard to build. Maria took a deep breath and stepped around the corner into the shower area. "Hey there," she said in the friendliest voice she could manage. "Is everything okay over here?" The 4 women turned to look at her, and Maria could see the calculations running through their heads. They saw exactly what she wanted them to see. A small, unremarkable woman in gym clothes who looked like she would blow over in a strong wind. She posed no threat whatsoever. "Everything's fine," said the blonde one, clearly the leader of the group. "This doesn't concern you. Why don't you mind your own business?" Maria smiled apologetically. "I'm sorry, I don't mean to intrude. It's just that Ashley helps me all the time at the front desk, and she looks upset. I wanted to make sure she was all right." "She's fine," said the redhead. "We're just having a friendly conversation, right, Ashley?" Ashley looked at Maria with desperate eyes but managed to nod. "It's okay," she whispered, but her voice said the exact opposite. Maria took another step forward, still maintaining her harmless appearance. "Well, if you're sure everything's fine, maybe Ashley and I could just head out together? I was about to leave anyway, and I could give her a ride home if she needs one." The 4 women exchanged glances. This was clearly not part of their plan. They had expected to corner Ashley alone, not to have some random woman trying to interfere. "I told you," the blonde said, her voice getting harder. "This doesn't concern you. Ashley and us. We have some things to work out. Private things." "Actually," Maria said, still smiling but taking another step forward, "I think Ashley would rather leave now. Isn't that right, Ashley?" For a moment, Ashley looked like she might actually try to leave. She took a half step away from the wall, hope flickering in her eyes. But the blonde woman moved to block her path. "She's not going anywhere until we say she can go," the blonde said. "And neither are you." Maria felt something shift inside her chest. It was like a switch being flipped, or a door being opened that she had been trying very hard to keep closed. She had really hoped it would not come to this. She had really hoped she could talk her way out of this situation without having to become someone she was not supposed to be anymore. But some people just would not listen to reason. The tension in the shower room thickened like humidity before a storm. Maria could feel her heartbeat changing, settling into the steady rhythm that had carried her through countless dangerous situations. Her breathing became controlled and deliberate. Every muscle in her body remained relaxed but ready. To anyone watching, she still looked like just another gym member who had stumbled into an uncomfortable situation. "Look," Maria said, keeping her voice calm and reasonable. "I really think there's been some kind of misunderstanding here. Ashley's just a sweet kid who works at the front desk. I'm sure whatever this is about, we can all work it out like adults." The blonde woman who seemed to be the leader of the group stepped closer to Maria. She was probably 6 feet tall and had the build of someone who had played college volleyball or basketball. Her 3 friends spread out slightly, positioning themselves to surround both Maria and Ashley. They moved with the coordinated confidence of people who had done this before. "You know what your problem is?" the blonde said, getting close enough that Maria could smell her perfume mixed with sweat from her workout. You don't know when to mind your own business. We tried to be nice about it, but you just don't get the hint. Behind her, Maria could hear Ashley's breathing becoming more rapid and shallow. The poor girl was probably having a panic attack. Maria had seen enough of those in her military career to recognize the signs. Ashley needed to get out of this situation soon, before her fear overwhelmed her completely. My name's Maria, Maria said, extending her hand as if she wanted to shake hands and introduce herself properly. I don't think we've met before. What's your name? The gesture caught the blonde off guard for just a moment. It was such a normal, friendly thing to do that it didn't fit with the threatening atmosphere the four women had been trying to create. For a split second, social conditioning almost made her respond politely. Then she seemed to remember that she was supposed to be intimidating someone. My name's none of your business, she snapped, ignoring Maria's outstretched hand. And your name's about to be mud if you don't get out of here right now. Maria let her hand drop to her side, but she maintained her friendly expression. I really don't want any trouble. It's just that this seems like kind of an unfair situation. 4 against 1 isn't very sporting, you know? Life's not fair, said one of the other women, a brunette with arms like tree trunks. Maybe little Ashley here should have thought about that before she decided to flirt with other people's boyfriends. I wasn't flirting with anyone, Ashley managed to say, her voice barely audible. I was just doing my job. I'm nice to everyone who comes to the front desk. That's literally what they pay me to do. Oh, please, the redhead scoffed. You think we're stupid? We saw how you were looking at Derek. All those smiles and giggles when he signed in for his workouts. Maria pieced together the situation quickly. Derek was probably some college guy who came to the gym regularly. Ashley was friendly to him the same way she was friendly to everyone. But someone had gotten jealous and decided that Ashley was trying to steal her boyfriend. Instead of talking to Derek about it, or just talking to Ashley like a reasonable human being, they had decided to ambush her in the locker room when she was most vulnerable. It was stupid and cruel and completely unnecessary. It was exactly the kind of bullying behavior that Maria had spent years fighting against in much more serious contexts. She had not become a Navy SEAL to let small-town bullies terrorize innocent people. Look, Maria tried one more time. I'm sure this is all just a big misunderstanding. Ashley wasn't trying to steal anyone's boyfriend. She's just friendly because that's her job. Maybe you could all sit down somewhere and talk this through like adults? The blonde woman laughed, but there was no humor in it. You really don't get it, do you? We don't want to talk. We want to teach little Miss Perfect here a lesson about staying in her lane. And what kind of lesson would that be? Maria asked, though she was pretty sure she already knew the answer. The kind of lesson that leaves marks, the brunette said, with a nasty grin. The kind that she'll remember every time she thinks about smiling at someone else's man. That was enough.
Maria had tried reasoning with them, had tried to de-escalate the situation peacefully.
But they were committed to hurting Ashley, and Maria could not let that happen. She had taken an oath a long time ago to protect people who could not protect themselves, and that oath did not expire just because she was not wearing a uniform anymore. Ashley, Maria said without taking her eyes off the four women, I want you to walk out of here right now. Go to the front desk and call the police. She's not going anywhere, the blonde said, stepping sideways to block Ashley's path to the exit. Yes, she is, Maria said, and for the first time her voice carried a hint of the authority she had learned to command in life or death situations. Ashley, go, now! Ashley looked uncertainly between Maria and her tormentors. She clearly wanted to run, but she was terrified of making things worse for herself or for the woman who was trying to help her. Don't you dare move, the redhead warned Ashley. You try to leave and things are going to get a lot worse for both of you. Maria sighed. She really had hoped it would not come to this. She had spent 3 years building a quiet, peaceful life where she never had to hurt anyone. But sometimes peace was not an option. Sometimes the only way to protect innocent people was to become dangerous again. Ashley, Maria said, her voice completely calm now, when I tell you to move, you run for the door and you don't look back. Do you understand me? What are you, her bodyguard or something? The blonde laughed. Lady, you're about 5 feet tall and you probably weigh 120 pounds soaking wet. What exactly do you think you're going to do against the 4 of us? Maria looked at each of the women in turn, assessing their positions, their balance, their likely reaction times. The blonde was the leader, but probably not the most dangerous fighter. The brunette had more muscle mass and looked like she had some training, maybe high school wrestling or martial arts. The redhead was quick and wiry, probably fast with her hands. The fourth woman, who had not spoken much, was hanging back slightly. She might be having second thoughts about the whole situation. I'm going to ask you one more time to let Ashley leave, Maria said. After that, things are going to happen very quickly, and you're not going to like how they turn out. Is that a threat? The brunette asked, stepping forward aggressively. It's a promise, Maria replied. What happened next took less than 10 seconds, but those 10 seconds changed everything. The brunette lunged forward first, probably intending to grab Maria by the shoulders and intimidate her with her size advantage. It was a reasonable tactic against most people. Maria was not most people. As the brunette reached for her, Maria stepped slightly to the side and grabbed the woman's extended arm. Using the attacker's own momentum against her, Maria pivoted and threw the brunette over her hip in a perfect judo throw. The woman hit the tiled floor hard enough to knock the wind out of her and lay there gasping. The blonde reacted next, swinging a wild haymaker punch at Maria's head. Maria ducked under the swing easily and drove her fist into the blonde's solar plexus with surgical precision. The punch was perfectly calculated to cause maximum pain and disable her opponent without causing permanent damage. The blonde doubled over, unable to breathe. The redhead was faster than the others and managed to grab Maria from behind, wrapping her arms around Maria's waist in what might have been an effective wrestling hold against someone who had not been trained by the best combat instructors in the world. Maria dropped her weight, broke the hold with a simple leverage technique, and spun around to deliver an elbow strike to the redhead's ribs that sent her staggering backward into the wall. The fourth woman, seeing her three friends neutralized in a matter of seconds, decided that discretion was the better part of valor. She turned and ran for the exit, without even trying to help her fallen comrades. Maria straightened up and brushed off her gym clothes as if nothing particularly interesting had just happened. The entire confrontation had lasted less time than it took to tie a pair of shoes. Ashley stood frozen against the wall, her eyes wide with shock. She had never seen anything like what had just happened. One moment, Maria had been the same quiet, friendly woman who always said please and thank you at the front desk. The next moment, she had moved like something out of an action movie, taking down 3 athletic college students with moves that looked almost too easy to be real. Are you okay? Maria asked, turning to Ashley with the same concerned expression she might have worn if Ashley had just dropped some papers. Ashley nodded slowly, unable to speak. Good, Maria said. Why don't you go get dressed and I'll walk you to your car. I don't think these ladies are going to bother you again, but it's probably better to be safe. The brunette was starting to sit up, holding her back and groaning. The blonde was still doubled over, trying to catch her breath. The redhead was leaning against the wall, one hand pressed to her ribs. What the hell are you? The blonde managed to gasp out. Maria looked down at her with the same mild expression she used when someone asked her about filing procedures at the college. I'm just someone who doesn't like bullies, she said simply. But as Ashley hurried away to get dressed, and as the 3 defeated women slowly picked themselves up off the floor, Maria felt a familiar mixture of satisfaction and regret. She had protected an innocent person, which felt good, but she had also blown her cover completely. There was no way this incident was going to stay quiet. Too many people would hear about the mild-mannered college administrator who had single-handedly taken down 3 college athletes in a gym locker room. Her peaceful, anonymous life in Millfield was probably over. As she gathered her own things from her locker, Maria tried to figure out how much time she had before people started asking questions she could not answer. She might have a few days, maybe a week, before someone got curious enough to start digging into her background. When they did, they would discover that Maria Santos had not existed before 3 years ago. From there, it would not take long for someone with the right resources to figure out who she really was. She had contingency plans for this situation. She always had contingency plans. But she had hoped she would never need to use them. She had really started to like her quiet life in Colorado. Ashley was waiting for her by the front desk when Maria came out of the locker room. The young woman still looked shaken, but she managed a grateful smile. Thank you, Ashley said quietly. I don't know what would have happened if you hadn't been there. You don't need to thank me, Maria replied. Are you sure you're okay? Do you need me to drive you home? I'm okay, Ashley said, though her hands were still shaking slightly. But Maria, what you did in there, how did you know how to fight like that? It was the question Maria had been dreading. She could see the curiosity and confusion in Ashley's eyes. The girl was trying to reconcile the quiet woman she knew from the college with the person who had just moved like a trained warrior. I took some self-defense classes, Maria said, which was technically true, though it was like saying that Navy SEALs took some swimming lessons. Ashley nodded, but Maria could tell she was not entirely convinced. It was going to be a problem. As they walked out to the parking lot together, Maria's mind was already working on damage control. She needed to figure out how much Ashley had actually seen and understood. She needed to know if any of the 4 attackers were likely to report the incident to the police or to start spreading stories around town. And she needed to decide whether she could salvage her life in Millfield or if it was time to disappear again. But as they reached Ashley's car, something happened that changed everything once more. A black SUV with government plates pulled into the parking lot and parked directly in front of them. 2 men in dark suits got out and walked straight toward Maria. She recognized them immediately. They were the kind of men who worked for agencies that did not officially exist. The kind of men who knew things about Maria's past that were supposed to be buried so deep that nobody would ever find them. "Maria Santos," said the taller of the 2 men, "we need to talk." The parking lot suddenly felt smaller and more dangerous than any combat zone Maria had ever been in. The 2 men approaching her moved with the controlled precision of people who are accustomed to violence. Though they tried to hide it behind professional smiles and expensive suits, Maria recognized their type immediately. Government operatives, probably CIA or NSA, possibly military intelligence. The kind of people who knew how to make problems disappear permanently. "I'm sorry," Maria said, keeping her voice level and unremarkable. "Do I know you gentlemen?" Ashley looked confused and frightened, glancing between Maria and the 2 strangers. She was clearly picking up on the tension in the air, even if she did not understand what was happening. "Miss Santos," the taller man said, "my name is Agent Johnson, and this is Agent Williams. We're with the Department of Defense. We'd like to speak with you privately about a matter of national security." Maria felt her stomach drop. After 3 years of carefully constructed anonymity, her old life had finally caught up with her. She had always known this moment might come, but she had hoped it would be later rather than sooner. She had hoped she would have more time to become someone else completely. "I think you have me confused with someone else," Maria said, though she knew it was pointless. These men would not have come all the way to Colorado if they were not absolutely certain about who she was. Agent Williams stepped forward slightly. He was shorter than his partner, but carried himself with the kind of confidence that came from years of dangerous work. "Ma'am, we know exactly who you are. We also know what happened in that locker room about 10 minutes ago. We've been monitoring the situation."
"Monitoring the situation?"
Maria repeated. "What does that mean exactly?" "It means," Agent Johnson said, "that we've been keeping an eye on you since you left the service. For your protection and for national security reasons." Ashley was looking increasingly alarmed. "Maria, what are they talking about?" "What service? I don't understand what's happening." Maria closed her eyes for a moment, trying to think. The fact that these men had shown up so quickly meant they had been watching her for a while, possibly since she had first arrived in Millfield. That was both reassuring and terrifying. Reassuring because it meant her cover identity had been good enough to fool casual investigation. Terrifying because it meant that her quiet, private life had been an illusion all along. "Ashley," Maria said carefully, "I think you should go home now. This doesn't concern you." "Actually," Agent Williams interjected, "Ms. Morrison is going to need to come with us as well. She witnessed the incident in the locker room. We need to debrief her and ensure her discretion." "Absolutely not," Maria said, and for the first time her voice carried the unmistakable tone of command that she had used to lead troops in combat. "Ashley has nothing to do with this. She goes home, she keeps her mouth shut about what happened tonight, and you leave her alone." The 2 agents exchanged glances. Clearly, they had not expected Maria to push back so forcefully. "I'm afraid that's not possible," Agent Johnson said. "Miss, Morrison has seen classified capabilities in action. Protocol requires that we bring her in for debriefing." "What classified capabilities?" Ashley asked, her voice getting higher with panic. "Maria, what are they talking about? What's going on?" Maria felt trapped between 2 impossible choices. She could protect Ashley by going along with whatever the agents wanted, which would probably mean disappearing from her life forever and possibly putting Ashley in danger anyway. Or she could resist, which would definitely put Ashley in the middle of a situation she was not equipped to handle. She decided to try a third option: controlled honesty. "Ashley," Maria said, turning to face the young woman directly, "my real name is not Maria Santos. I used to be in the military, and I was trained to do things that most people can't do. What you saw in the locker room was some of that training. These men work for the government, and they want to talk to me about my old job." "What kind of military training?" Ashley asked, though from her expression she was starting to piece together the answer on her own. "The kind that's classified." Agent Williams said before Maria could answer, which is why we need to have this conversation somewhere more private. Maria looked around the parking lot, calculating options. There were a few other cars scattered around, but no people visible. The gym was starting to empty out as the evening wound down. If she was going to make a move, now would be the time to do it. But running would only make things worse for Ashley, and it would confirm whatever suspicions these agents had about Maria being a security risk. Fine, Maria said. We'll talk. But Ashley goes home first, and you guarantee that she won't be contacted or bothered by any government personnel ever again. We can't make that kind of guarantee, Agent Johnson said. Then we have a problem, Maria replied. The standoff lasted for nearly a minute, with both sides calculating their options. Finally, Agent Williams spoke up. Ms. Morrison, he said, addressing Ashley directly. We're prepared to offer you a choice. You can come with us for a brief debriefing, after which you'll sign a non-disclosure agreement and return to your normal life. Or you can go home now and never speak of what happened tonight to anyone, ever. But understand that if you choose the second option, you'll be monitored periodically to ensure your compliance. Ashley looked at Maria with frightened, confused eyes. What should I do? Maria wanted to tell Ashley to run as far and as fast as she could, but she knew that would not solve anything. These people had resources that Ashley could not even imagine. If they wanted to keep track of her, they would find a way to do it regardless of what Maria said. Go home, Maria said quietly. Don't talk to anyone about what happened tonight. Not your friends, not your family, not anyone. Pretend it never happened and live your life normally. Ashley nodded reluctantly. But what about you? Will I see you again? Maria felt her heart break a little. Ashley was a sweet kid who had done nothing wrong except work at the wrong gym on the wrong night. She deserved better than to be dragged into the messy aftermath of Maria's past. I don't know, Maria said honestly. But Ashley, listen to me. You're going to be fine. These men are not going to hurt you as long as you keep quiet about tonight. Do you understand me? Ashley nodded again, tears starting to form in her eyes. She got into her car and drove away, leaving Maria alone with the two agents. Smart move, Agent Williams said. Now, shall we go somewhere and talk? We can talk right here, Maria said. I'm not getting into any vehicles with you people. Agent Johnson smiled, but there was no warmth in it. Ms. Santos, or should I call you by your real name? Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell, formerly of Naval Special Warfare Group? Hearing her real name spoken out loud after 3 years was like being punched in the stomach. Maria had worked so hard to bury Sarah Mitchell that sometimes she almost forgot that person had ever existed. But these men knew everything about her, probably including details that she wished she could forget herself. Sarah Mitchell is dead, Maria said. She died in Afghanistan along with the rest of her unit. No, Agent Williams corrected. Most of her unit died in Afghanistan. She survived, completed her mission, and was honorably discharged with full military honors. Then she disappeared into the civilian world under an assumed identity, which violated several military regulations and potentially compromised national security. Maria laughed bitterly. National security? I've been filing papers at a community college for 3 years. What national security threat could I possibly pose? The threat, Agent Johnson said, is what you know, the missions you completed, the people you worked with, the methods you learned. That information doesn't stop being classified just because you decide to become a civilian. I signed all the NDAs, Maria protested. I went through all the proper debriefing procedures. I never told anyone anything about anything. We know, Agent Williams said. Your record has been exemplary, but circumstances have changed. We need your help with something, and we need it now. Maria felt a chill run down her spine. What kind of help? The kind that requires your particular skill set, Agent Johnson said. The kind that could save a lot of innocent lives. I'm not a SEAL anymore, Maria said firmly. I'm not a soldier anymore. I'm just someone who wants to be left alone. What you are, Agent Williams said, is one of the most highly trained special operations warriors this country has ever produced. What you are is someone who took an oath to protect and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic. What you are, Agent Johnson added, is the only person who can stop something very bad from happening to very good people. Maria stared at the two men, trying to read their expressions and body language. They were good at hiding their emotions, but she could see genuine urgency in their eyes. Whatever this was about, they were not just fishing for information or trying to bring her in for routine questioning. This was something big, something immediate, and something that required her specific capabilities. "Tell me what's going on," she said finally. Agent Williams pulled out a tablet computer and handed it to her. The screen showed satellite photos of what looked like a military compound in a desert environment. Maria could see buildings, vehicles, and what appeared to be guard positions. 3 days ago, Agent Johnson said, a group of American aid workers was taken hostage by a terrorist organization in Somalia. The group includes 2 doctors, a nurse, and an engineer who were working on a water purification project in a refugee camp. Maria studied the photos more carefully. The compound looked like a fortress, with high walls and multiple defensive positions. Getting people out of a place like that would require a very specific kind of operation. "What? Does this have to do with me?" she asked, though she was beginning to suspect she already knew the answer. "The hostages are being held in a compound that you visited before," Agent Williams said. "In 2021, during Operation Desert Falcon, you and your unit conducted a reconnaissance mission there." Maria felt her blood turn to ice. Operation Desert Falcon had been one of her last missions before everything went wrong. She remembered the compound, remembered the intelligence they had gathered, remembered the detailed maps and floor plans her unit had created. "That operation was classified above your pay grade," she said carefully. "Not anymore," Agent Johnson replied. "The classification has been lifted for this specific situation. We need someone who knows the layout of that compound. Someone who understands its weaknesses and defensive capabilities. We need someone who can get a rescue team in and out without getting everyone killed." "There are other people who know about that compound," Maria protested. "Other members of my unit, other intelligence operatives." Agent Williams and Agent Johnson exchanged another look, this one grimmer than before. "Actually," Agent Williams said quietly, "there aren't. You're the only surviving member of your unit who participated in Operation Desert Falcon. Everyone else is either dead or missing in action." The words hit Maria like a physical blow. She had known that most of her unit had been killed in the ambush that ended her military career, but she had not known that she was the only survivor who had been on the Desert Falcon mission. "How long do I have to think about this?" she asked. "The hostages will be executed in 72 hours if their demands aren't met," Agent Johnson said. "We need to launch the rescue operation in 48 hours to have any chance of success. And if I say no, then 4 innocent Americans will die," Agent Williams said simply. "And you'll have to live with knowing that you could have saved them." Maria closed her eyes and tried to think clearly. She had built her new life specifically to get away from this kind of decision, this kind of responsibility. She had thought she was done making choices that involved life and death, done carrying the weight of other people's survival on her shoulders. But some responsibilities followed you, no matter how far you ran from them. 2 hours later, Maria found herself on a military transport plane flying toward a classified location that the agents would only describe as somewhere in the Horn of Africa. She had traded her civilian clothes for military fatigues that felt both familiar and strange after 3 years away from active duty. The fabric smelled like regulation detergent and carried the weight of memories she had tried very hard to bury. Sitting across from her in the cargo bay were 6 other operators, all male, all wearing the kind of relaxed alertness that came from years of dangerous work. They had been polite but distant when Agent Johnson introduced her as their mission consultant. She could see the questions in their eyes. Who was this small woman who looked like she belonged in an office rather than a combat zone? Why was someone who had been out of the service for 3 years suddenly the key to a high-priority rescue mission? The team leader, a Navy SEAL named Commander Jake Reynolds, had been professional but skeptical during their initial briefing. He was about Maria's age, probably mid-30s, with the kind of weathered face that spoke of multiple deployments in difficult places. His questions had been sharp and direct. How well did she remember the compound layout? How old was her intelligence? Could she guarantee that her information was still accurate? Maria had answered as honestly as she could, but the truth was that she was not entirely sure herself. 3 years was a long time in the world of special operations. Buildings could be modified, security measures could be upgraded, and defensive positions could be changed. She was operating on the assumption that the fundamental structure of the compound had remained the same, but assumptions could get people killed. "Tell me again about the entry points," Commander Reynolds said, unfolding a tablet that showed current satellite images of the target compound. Maria studied the screen, comparing what she saw to her memories from 2021. "The main gate is heavily defended and covered by overlapping fields of fire from guard towers. There's a service entrance on the east side that was lightly guarded when we were there, but it's visible from the main compound. The best option is probably the storm drainage system. Drainage system? Asked Sergeant Mike Torres, the team's demolitions expert. The compound was built on the site of an old colonial fort, Maria explained. The original builders dug a network of tunnels to channel rainwater away from the foundations. When the current occupants renovated the place, they didn't bother to seal all the old drainage tunnels properly. There's an access point about 200 meters south of the perimeter wall that connects to a tunnel running directly under the main building. Commander Reynolds made notes on his tablet. What's the tunnel like? Height, width, obstructions? Maria closed her eyes, trying to visualize the cramped, dusty passage she and her team had crawled through 3 years ago. About 4 feet high, maybe 3 feet wide. Concrete construction, but showing its age. There were some cave-ins and debris piles, but nothing impassable for fit personnel. The tunnel opens into the basement of the main building through a grate that can be removed from the inside. Security measures in the tunnel? None that we detected. It's not really large enough for effective defensive positions, and the current occupants probably don't even know it exists. The team's intelligence specialist, Petty Officer Lisa Chen, looked up from her computer. Current satellite imagery shows the hostages are being held on the second floor of the main building, northeast corner. 4 tangos on perimeter patrol, at least 6 more inside the building. At least 6 more, Commander Reynolds repeated grimly. Could be 12, could be 20. We won't know until we're inside. Maria nodded. That's why speed is going to be critical. Get in fast, secure the hostages, and get out before they can organize an effective response. The longer we stay inside, the more time they have to call for reinforcements or execute the prisoners. The conversation was interrupted by the pilot's voice over the intercom, announcing that they would be landing in 15 minutes. Maria felt her stomach tighten with a combination of fear and anticipation that she remembered all too well from her active duty days. It was the feeling that came right before everything became very dangerous, very quickly. As they prepared for landing, Commander Reynolds pulled Maria aside for a private conversation. "Level with me," he said quietly. "Are you ready for this? I know you've been out of the game for a while. I know this isn't exactly voluntary. If you have any doubts about your ability to perform under fire, now is the time to speak up." Maria looked at the younger SEAL commander and saw her own doubts reflected in his eyes. He was wondering if he could trust his team's lives to someone who had been filing papers at a community college for the last 3 years. It was a reasonable question. "Commander," she said, 3 years ago, I was part of a unit that specialized in exactly this kind of operation. I've been in dozens of similar compounds under similar circumstances against similar opposition. My skills may be a little rusty, but my memory is perfect. I know that building better than anyone else you're going to find." "That's not what I'm asking," Reynolds pressed. "I'm asking if you can handle the stress, the violence, the possibility that not everyone is coming home tonight. Can you do what needs to be done, even if it means killing people?" It was a fair question, and one that Maria had been asking herself since the moment she agreed to this mission. The truth was that she did not know the answer. She had spent 3 years trying to become someone who did not solve problems with violence, someone who did not carry the weight of other people's deaths on her conscience. Now she was being asked to step back into that world and become Sarah Mitchell again, at least for one night. "I guess we'll find out," she said. The landing was rough, as military landings often were. They had touched down at a forward operating base that consisted of little more than a runway, some temporary buildings, and a lot of sand. The air was hot and dry, tasting of dust and jet fuel. Maria felt the familiar sensation of being in a place where Americans were not welcome, and survival depended on superior training and equipment. The final mission briefing took place in a prefabricated building that served as the base's command center. The walls were covered with maps, satellite photos, and communications equipment. A dozen personnel moved around the room with the focused efficiency of people preparing for something dangerous. Latest intelligence, announced Colonel Sarah Kim, the mission commander, confirms that all 4 hostages are alive and being held in the target building. However, we've detected increased radio chatter from the target area, which suggests they may be planning to move the prisoners or escalate their demands. Commander Reynolds studied the updated photos. "What's our window?" 6 hours, Colonel Kim replied. "After that, we expect them to either kill the hostages or move them to a secondary location that we haven't identified." 6 hours. Maria felt the familiar rush of adrenaline that came with compressed timelines and high stakes. This was why she had been good at this job. Her ability to think clearly and move decisively when everything was falling apart and people's lives hung in the balance. "Equipment check," Commander Reynolds called out. The team began the methodical process of testing weapons, communications gear, and night vision equipment. Every piece of equipment was checked twice, because equipment failures in combat got people killed. Maria was issued a standard loadout: assault rifle, sidearm, body armor, and enough ammunition to fight her way through a small army. It felt heavier than she remembered, but the weight was reassuring. She had learned a long time ago that proper equipment could mean the difference between going home and being carried home. Transport in 30 minutes, Colonel Kim announced. Questions? Rules of engagement? Asked Sergeant Torres. Authorized to use deadly force to protect the hostages and complete the mission, Colonel Kim replied. But remember, this is a rescue operation, not an assault. Your primary objective is to get those people out alive. As the team made final preparations, Maria found herself thinking about Ashley, probably safe at home in Colorado, completely unaware that the quiet woman she knew from the college was about to participate in a military operation on the other side of the world. She thought about her small apartment, her routine job, and the peaceful life she had built for herself in Millfield. After tonight, she could never go back to that life. Even if the mission was successful, even if everyone came home alive, too many people now knew who she really was. The government agents would want to debrief her extensively. There would be reports to file, evaluations to complete, and questions about her fitness for civilian life. But more importantly, she would have to face the fact that she could not really leave this world behind. No matter how hard she tried to become someone else, no matter how many years she spent filing papers and living quietly, she would always be Sarah Mitchell. She would always be someone who knew how to find people in the dark and bring them home safely. The helicopter ride to the target area took 40 minutes, flying low and fast over terrain that looked like the surface of Mars in the green glow of night vision goggles. Maria sat with her back against the aircraft's hull, feeling the familiar vibration of rotor blades and turbine engines. Around her, the other team members sat in the relaxed silence of professionals preparing for action. As they approached the target area, the pilot's voice crackled through their headsets. 2 minutes to insertion point. Commander Reynolds gave hand signals for final equipment checks. Maria felt her training taking over, pushing aside 3 years of civilian life and replacing it with the focused clarity that had kept her alive through dozens of similar operations. 1 minute, the pilot announced. Through the aircraft's windows, Maria could see the lights of the compound in the distance. It looked smaller than she remembered, more vulnerable. But she knew that was an illusion. In a few minutes, that collection of buildings would become the most dangerous place on Earth for the 7 Americans who were about to drop out of the sky and try to save 4 people they had never met. 30 seconds. Maria checked her weapon one final time and prepared to become Sarah Mitchell again. The insertion was flawless, 7 shadows dropping silently from the night sky onto sand that muffled their landing. Maria's boots hit the ground with muscle memory taking over, her body automatically rolling to absorb impact while her eyes swept the surrounding terrain for threats. The desert air was cooler than she expected, carrying the scent of dust and distant cooking fires from the compound half a mile away. Commander Reynolds materialized beside her, hand signals confirming that all team members had landed safely. They moved with the coordinated precision of a pack of wolves, each operator knowing exactly where the others were without needing to look. Maria found herself falling naturally into the rhythm she had learned years ago, her civilian persona dissolving completely as Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell took control. The approach to the drainage tunnel took 22 minutes of careful movement across broken terrain. Maria led the way, her memory of the area proving accurate despite 3 years and countless worries that details might have changed. The access point was exactly where she remembered it, a concrete culvert, hidden behind a cluster of rocks and scrub vegetation that looked completely natural unless you knew what to look for. "This is it," she whispered into her throat microphone as she knelt beside the entrance to the tunnel system. Sergeant Torres moved forward with a fiber-optic camera to examine the interior. After a few minutes of careful probing, he gave the all-clear signal. The tunnel was unguarded and apparently unchanged since Maria's last visit. One by one, the team members disappeared into the narrow passage. Maria went third, following Petty Officer Chen into the cramped concrete tube that would either deliver them safely into the compound or become their tomb if something went wrong. The tunnel was exactly as she remembered it, barely wide enough for an adult to crawl through, smelling of stale air and decades-old construction materials. They moved in single file, weapons slung across their backs, relying entirely on night vision and Maria's memory of the route. Every few minutes, Commander Reynolds would tap her ankle, a silent request for confirmation that they were still on the right path. Every time, Maria tapped back twice, affirmative, continue forward. The journey through the tunnel took 18 minutes, though it felt like hours. When they finally reached the grate that opened into the compound's basement, Maria could hear the sound of voices and movement from somewhere above their heads. The building was occupied, which meant their intelligence about the hostages' location was probably accurate. Sergeant Torres made quick work of the grate's mounting bolts, his tools moving silently in practiced hands. Within minutes, they had a clear path into the basement of the main building. Commander Reynolds checked his watch and gave hand signals. 28 minutes since insertion, right on schedule. The basement was dark and cluttered with storage materials that provided excellent concealment. Maria oriented herself quickly, remembering the building's layout from her previous reconnaissance mission. The stairway to the upper floors was 30 meters to the north, past a series of support pillars and equipment storage areas. As they moved through the basement, Maria could hear more activity from the floors above, male voices speaking in Arabic, occasional laughter, and the sound of boots on wooden floors. The building's occupants were relaxed, confident in their security measures, unaware that 7 highly trained killers were moving silently through their stronghold. At the base of the stairway, Commander Reynolds gathered the team for final coordination. According to their intelligence, the hostages were being held in a room on the second floor, northeast corner of the building. That meant climbing 1 flight of stairs, moving through at least 2 rooms, and neutralizing any guards they encountered along the way. The plan was simple. Maria and Commander Reynolds would move to the hostage location while the rest of the team secured the building and established overwatch positions. Once the hostages were located and secured, everyone would exit through the same tunnel they had used to enter. Simple plans were usually the best plans, but Maria knew that no plan survived first contact with the enemy. They began their ascent of the stairway with Petty Officer Chen in the lead, her weapon trained on the landing above while the rest of the team followed at precise intervals. Each step was placed carefully to avoid creaking boards that might alert the building's occupants to their presence. At the top of the stairs, they encountered their first guard. He was young, maybe 20 years old, sitting in a chair beside a doorway with an assault rifle across his lap. He was smoking a cigarette and looking bored, clearly not expecting any trouble. Chen took him down with a suppressed pistol shot that made less noise than a book dropping on a table. The guard slumped forward in his chair, unconscious rather than dead. Maria felt a moment of surprise at Chen's restraint. In her day, threats were usually eliminated permanently to prevent them from raising alarms. But this was a new generation of special operators, trained to use minimum necessary force even in the most dangerous situations. They moved through the first floor quickly, clearing rooms with the mechanical efficiency of people who had done this hundreds of times before. The building was larger than Maria remembered, with more rooms and corridors than her 3-year-old intelligence had suggested. But the fundamental layout was the same, and she was able to guide the team toward their objective without hesitation. On the second floor, they encountered heavier resistance. 2 guards were positioned outside the room where the hostages were being held, both of them alert and well armed. Commander Reynolds and Maria approached from opposite ends of the corridor, using hand signals to coordinate their assault. The engagement lasted less than 10 seconds. Both guards were down before either of them had a chance to raise an alarm. But Maria could hear activity from other parts of the building, suggesting that their presence might have been detected despite their efforts at stealth. The door to the hostage room was locked and reinforced, but Sergeant Torres's explosive charges made short work of the barrier. As smoke cleared from the doorway, Maria could see 4 figures huddled in the far corner of the room, 2 men and 2 women, all of them looking terrified and confused. American military, Commander Reynolds announced as he entered the room. We're here to get you out. Are any of you injured? The hostages were in poor condition but mobile. Doctor. Janet Morrison, the team leader of the aid group, had a badly bruised face and what looked like a broken wrist. The others showed signs of physical abuse but no injuries that would prevent them from moving quickly. Maria helped them to their feet while Commander Reynolds established communications with the rest of the team. Package secured, he reported, beginning extraction. But as they prepared to move the hostages toward the stairway, the building erupted in activity. Shouts echoed through the corridors, doors slammed, and the sound of running feet suggested that their presence was no longer secret. Someone had discovered the unconscious guards or detected their movements through the building. Contact front, came Sergeant Torres's voice over the radio. Multiple hostiles moving up the main stairway. Contact rear, reported Petty Officer Chen. They're trying to cut off our exit route. Commander Reynolds assessed the situation quickly. They were trapped on the second floor with 4 civilians who could not move quickly or defend themselves. The original extraction route through the basement tunnel was compromised, and unknown numbers of hostile forces were converging on their position. It was exactly the kind of situation where plans fell apart and people died. "Maria," Commander Reynolds said, "you know this building better than anyone. Is there another way out?" Maria closed her eyes for a moment, visualizing the building's structure from her memories of the reconnaissance mission. There had been external fire escapes on the older sections of the building, but she was not sure if they were still intact or accessible. "West wall," she said finally. "There should be a fire escape outside the window at the end of the corridor. It connects to the roof of the adjacent building." "Should be?" Commander Reynolds asked. "It was there 3 years ago," Maria replied. "I can't guarantee it's still functional." More gunfire erupted from the stairway, followed by the distinctive crack of Torres's explosives. The team was fighting a delaying action, but they could not hold their position indefinitely against superior numbers. "We're going with the fire escape," Commander Reynolds decided. "Maria, take point with the hostages. Everyone else, fighting withdrawal to the west corridor." What followed was the longest 10 minutes of Maria's life. Moving 4 terrified civilians through a building under siege required every skill she had learned in 8 years of special operations. The hostages were brave but untrained, trying their best to follow instructions while bullets flew around them and explosions shook the building's foundations. The fire escape was still there, though it looked like it had not been maintained since Maria's last visit. The metal structure was rusty, and several support brackets had pulled away from the wall, but it appeared to be structurally sound enough to support their weight. Getting the hostages down the fire escape while under fire was a nightmare of logistics and timing. Dr. Morrison's broken wrist made climbing difficult, and the team's engineer, a middle-aged man named Thompson, was clearly terrified of heights. But Maria and Commander Reynolds managed to get all 4 civilians safely to the ground, while the rest of the team provided covering fire from above. The escape route took them across the roofs of several adjacent buildings before descending to street level through another building's stairway. By the time they reached the predetermined extraction point, Maria could hear sirens in the distance and see vehicles moving through the compound. Their attack had stirred up a hornet's nest, but the hostages were safe. The helicopter extraction was as professional as everything else about the operation. Within minutes of reaching the pickup zone, they were airborne and heading toward the safety of international airspace. The 4 rescued aid workers sat huddled together, still processing what had happened to them and their dramatic rescue. As the compound disappeared behind them, Commander Reynolds sat down next to Maria. "Outstanding work," he said quietly. "Your intelligence was perfect, and your performance under fire was exceptional. The Navy could use more operators like you." Maria looked out the helicopter's window at the desert landscape passing below. In a few hours, she would be debriefed by intelligence officers who would want to know every detail of the mission. After that, she would face decisions about her future that she was not ready to make. But for now, she was content to sit in the familiar vibration of a military aircraft and watch 4 innocent people flying towards safety. Dr. Morrison caught her eye and mouthed, "Thank you," with tears streaming down her face. Sarah Mitchell smiled and nodded in response. For the first time in 3 years, she felt like herself again. 3 weeks later, Maria Santos returned to Millfield, Colorado. She walked into the administrative office at Miller Community College on a Tuesday morning, sat down at her desk, and began sorting through the stack of forms that had accumulated during her unexplained absence. Her supervisor, Dean Henderson, stopped by her desk around 10 o'clock. "Maria, good to have you back," he said. "I hope everything is okay with your family emergency." "Everything's fine now," Maria replied. "Thank you for understanding." Dean Henderson nodded and walked away, satisfied with the simple explanation that Agent Johnson had provided for her sudden disappearance. But things were not the same as before. Maria could feel the difference in how people looked at her, especially Ashley, who had been told that Maria was helping with a family crisis, but clearly suspected there was more to the story. At the gym that evening, Maria noticed that word about the locker room incident had spread through the facility's membership. People stared at her with a mixture of curiosity and respect that made her uncomfortable. The story had grown in the telling, as stories always did, until some people believed that she had single-handedly defeated an entire gang of would-be attackers. After her workout, Ashley approached her cautiously. "Maria," the young woman said, "I've been thinking about what happened that night, about what you did, and about those men who came to talk to you. I think you're not really who you say you are." Maria paused in packing her gym bag. "What do you mean?" "I mean," Ashley said carefully, "I think you're someone very special. Someone who does very important things. And I think maybe you've been protecting people like me your whole life." Maria looked at the earnest young woman and felt something shift inside her chest. For 3 years, she had tried to hide from who she really was. She had tried to become ordinary, unremarkable, safe. But some people were not meant to be ordinary. Ashley, she said quietly, some things are better left unknown. I know, Ashley replied. But I want you to know that whatever you really do, whoever you really are, I'm grateful. And if you ever need someone to have your back the way you had mine, you just have to ask. That night, Maria sat in her small apartment and thought about the choice that Agent Johnson had offered her before she left the debriefing facility. The government wanted her back. There were other situations like the hostage rescue, other missions that required her specific skills and experience. They were prepared to offer her a new identity, a new assignment, and a chance to do the work she had been born to do. She also thought about Millfield, about her quiet job and her routine life, about the peace she had found in filing papers and answering phones, in being someone who solved problems with words rather than weapons. Both choices had their appeal. Both offered their own form of service, their own way of making a difference in the world. As she made her decision, Maria Santos smiled. She had spent 3 years learning how to be ordinary. But maybe it was time to remember how to be extraordinary again. The next morning, she called Agent Johnson and told him she was ready to come home.